we are rolling. Okay, if you'd like to introduce yourselves.
Selves.
So,
My name is Jim Basinger.
uh-huh. And if you'd like to tell me when and where you served.
When and where I served. I joined the United States Marine Corps in Evansville, Indiana in 1985.
Cool.
And then I went to basic training. I went to boot camp for the Marine Corps in Camp Parris Island, South Carolina. Parris Island. And I was there for 3 months. And then I went to my school at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And I was there for 3 months. And then I got orders to Okinawa, Japan. And so I went to Okinawa, Japan. Would have been like the fall of '85. And I was there for 12 months. While I was in Okinawa, Japan, I also went to the Philippines, and I went to Korea for different deployment operations. After that, I returned to the United States, and I went to Camp Pendleton, California. And I was stationed at Camp Pendleton for about 3 years. I worked with the Weapons Training Battalion for the Recruit Depot, MCRD, San Diego. And so I worked on training soldiers, or actually training Marines and stuff for weapons qualification. And after that, I got out of the Marine Corps in June 8th, 1989. And I was out for a few months, and then Desert Storm started.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to re-enlist in the Marine Corps, and I joined the Oklahoma Army National Guard. And and that would have been probably 89, somewhere late 89, early 90. And I went to basic training in the Army at Fort Benning, Georgia. And so I was there for several months, and then I pretty much did Reserve National Guard training for several years, both in Oklahoma, Illinois, and Indiana. And that's thunder, isn't
it? Yeah, that's thunder.
In 2002, I got orders to go on active duty, and I went to, of course, we did training at Camp Atterbury in Indiana, and my infantry battalion got mobilized, and we went to Kuwait. And I was in Kuwait for about 3 months, and then the war started into March 2003, and so we crossed the line of departure into Iraq and moved north along Highway 1 into Nasiriyah. And we stopped at Nasiriyah, same place where Jessica Lynch was taken hostage. She was on patrol. Transport unit that got attacked and ambushed. But so I was there for maybe 50, 60 days, something like that. And then we were moved to Jordan. So I went to Jordan. And while I was in Jordan, we were providing security for an airfield that was in the middle of nowhere that they were shutting down once They used to launch Scud missile attack, or not Scud attacks from there, but the teams that were looking for the Scud missiles would fly out of that air base and search for the Scud missile launchers in, I guess it would be Western Iraq. And I was there about 30 or 40 days, and then we went back to Kuwait, and we were the quick response force for the 82nd Airborne for about a month, and then we got redeployed to Central Iraq, and I was in a place called Kalzu, Camp Kalzu, which is probably about 30 miles south of Baghdad. And while we were there, we run reconnaissance mission, route clearance, what we call knock-and searches. We would search houses, known terrorists, or targets that we would go look for. We also would do night ambushes and those type of things. And I was there until we returned to Kuwait, and I think it was probably around January 2004. And so I came back. I was a platoon leader there. I came back with my unit 2003, 2004. And then I was back about 4 or 5 months, and I volunteered to go back with another unit. So I redeployed, and I went to Mosul, Iraq, which is in the northern part of the country. And so I was stationed in Mosul. We were assigned to that area. And we were in Mosul for about 12 months. From there, we would go out on missions. Went to Talafar when they had some insurgents coming there. Went up into Kurdistan area, north of Iraq, where the Kurds were, and then basically just patrolling different areas. I was there for the first election in Iraq, the first democratic election. So we helped secure polling booths and stuff like that when I was there. And then I came back, and I got assigned to another unit, and they got an alert order. By that time, I was a command sergeant major of an infantry battalion, and I decided that I was going to retire. And rather than retire, the military wanted me to assume command of the 76th Infantry Brigade Rear Detachment, because they had another unit going forward. So I did that for almost 2 years. And then when that unit came back, I retired in 2009, and I had about 25 years of service.
Okay. Okay, so you've obviously been a lot of places.
I have been a lot of places.
And so out of all of those, all the places you were deployed, what's probably your favorite?
Home.
Home.
Let's see. Probably it was interesting being in the Philippines. It was interesting being in Korea and Japan. It was interesting being in the Middle East. Probably the neatest thing I saw was when I was in Jordan, and we went to Aqaba, and we went to Petra, P-E-R-T, Petra, P-E-T-R-A, Petra, which is kind of a ruins, ancient trading center in biblical times. It was carved out of into the canyons. You might have seen it on maybe Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom,
Okay.
where that red rock and that cathedral-looking thing, that's Petra. So that was probably one of the most interesting things that I saw or liked the most when I was over the time that I was in. Of course, I lived in San Diego and California and on the beach and all that good stuff, but probably of the most interesting things that I saw. That was probably it.
Cool. And were there any of those places that you would definitely never want to go back? Or?
I didn't particularly enjoy living in the dirt in southern Iraq in 2003 without, we literally lived outside on the ground for several months, and no regular showers, no hot
Right.
food, stuff like that. So, and it would get incredibly hot during the day. So, 109 degrees, 110, during the day. It was below sea level, so it was fairly hot. Although it wasn't very humid, it would get hot. So that was probably the worst place. Of course, I was in Korea in the wintertime, and that wasn't a lot of fun either. But you make your own entertainment depending on where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, backing up a little, so boot camp. Would you like to describe the boot camp experience?
Sure. So I went to boot camp and to basic training.
Mm-hmm.
I went to boot camp. I was 18, and they put you on a plane, and you arrive at your duty station, which was Parris Island, or if you're on the West Coast, you go to San Diego, and you get there in they time it so you kind of get there late at night, right? So you've got your civilian clothes on and your hair and all that stuff, and they bring you into a building, and of course people are kind of yelling a little bit, giving you direction, and they keep you up what seemed like 24 hours, doing paperwork and different things. And then, they take you over, and you get a few hours of sleep, and then they would take you over, and you get your uniform issue, you get your hair cut, some checks, medical checks, stuff like that, but it's called in-processing or reception. And then they move you over to your barracks where you're going to meet your drill instructors. So they set you all on the floor, and it's a platoon, probably 50 people or so, and you're sitting in there on the floor, and these three drill instructors would come in, and the drill instructor would introduce himself. You've probably seen the videos.
Mm-hmm.
He would introduce yourself, kind of give you the basics, introduce you to his two assistant drill instructors. So he would be the senior drill instructor, and those were the two assistant drill instructors. And then once the introductions are over, they lose their mind and they go berserker on you, and they are screaming and hollering and just breaking you down mentally and physically for most of the time you're there, but for that first couple of weeks, because it's phases. You have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, at least when I was in. So phase 1 is kind of like the forming phase. They teach you the basics of military discipline, marching, following rules, orders, following orders without question. And they do that for, probably 4 weeks or so, and then you go into phase 2, and you start learning about your weapon. And they give you a weapon when you're first there, and you've got to learn to clean that. But you do marksmanship in phase 2, and still more physical fitness training. Running, calisthenics. Every morning you do PT, physical training.
Mm-hmm.
So you get up, you go. I think you go to chow. Get up, go to chow, then do PT, and then we march for most of the day. It seemed like we're just marching in formation, back and forth, back and forth. And then you go to the weapons training battalion. Out there, you learn how to shoot your weapon, and it's about a week you spend out there. Then you come back, go into phase 3. In phase 3, they let you grow your hair about a quarter an inch long on the top. And so you kind of went through the forming and the storming, and now you get into the kind of the performing phase where you're refining all the things you need to learn to be a Marine. And once you successfully passed your physical fitness test, your weapons qualification, your knowledge, they teach a lot of history. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn and be able to pass. And swim qual, you get to learn, get your swim qualification. So you get all your certifications out by phase 3, and then you graduate. And that's when you go to your, whatever your job's going to be in the military, then you go to that location after that. But it's a pretty quick timeline, 3 months. You know, it seems really long when you're there, but it's really just a flash in the pan, and then you're out, and then you know all the things you need to know to be a Marine, and then you go to school. And then you learn what your specific. I was a combat engineer at the beginning, and so I had to learn demolition, bridging techniques, obstacles, wire mine obstacles, landmines, breaching techniques, pontoon bridges, you know, had to learn how to climb a telephone pole, you know, stuff like that. How to use a mine detector to clear for mines, how to clear a minefield, how to put mines in, all that good stuff. So that was about 8 weeks, I think I was in Lejeune. So that was kind of your initial training, so that when you go to the fleet, you're pretty much prepared to do the basic job. You still don't really know how the Marine Corps operates, but you know, that's kind of what they get you ready, get you all the skill sets, the basic skills that you need. So I went to Army basic training, and I was supposed to go to Fort Benning to go to school, infantry school. And when I got there, there was some kind of mix up in the timing. So if you're going to school, they have to have a vacancy for you to get into the school slot. And there was some kind of roster issue. And so I was in the reception center for about 25, 30 days, something like that. And of course, same stuff, cut your hair, you know, just like in the boot camp. But I had to make a few contacts with my state sergeant major and figure out what was going on. And so they finally told me that I could either go back home and then come back after Christmas, because I went before Christmas. Because in the Army, they let you go home on break for Christmas. They call it Exodus. Or I could join a basic training platoon that was just starting. So I opted to join a basic training platoon that just started. So I kind of did the boot camp basic training all over again, different branch, but I'd already been through 4 years in the Marine Corps and Marine Corps basic boot camp, and so it wasn't particularly challenging, you know. The physical part, you know, we'd run push-ups, you know, you have to maintain your physical fitness to be able to pass the PT test. The weapons qualification was a little different. So when I was in the Marine Corps boot camp, we would shoot at big giant targets from 200, 300, and 500, or 200 yards, 300 yards, and 500 yards. So we would shoot at these targets, and these targets would go up and down. There were people that they call them the butts, and that's a trench. So these targets are on rails. You run them up, you shoot at them, they pull them down, and they put a big plotter in there and mark your bullet strike. It's like a big orange disc. So you run up and you see where you shot. So you do you take you annotate that in your marksmanship book, where you shot it at, just like a sniper book, your wind direction, distance, where the round hit, and all that good stuff. Well, in the Army, you get the basic marksmanship training, and then you go to the range for qualification there, and they're pop-up targets. So it's like a head and chest silhouette, and it goes out to about 300 meters. So and they're far, close and far. So this one come up, that one come up, that one come up, and they just pop up randomly. And you have to shoot them, and you have to hit, I think it was like 21 out of 35 or something like that to qualify. So the marksmanship training is a little bit different. The Marine Corps is more on precision marksmanship, and the Army would focus more on hitting a target in a little more rapid time. The Army was a lot more fun shooting targets, because they go up, come down, and shoot, go up, come down, rather than laying in a prone position or the kneeling position or the standing position. The Marine Corps makes you a better shooter. The Army does a better job, I think, of more realistic
decision making.
Yeah, just being able to shoot in range distances from 50 to 300, where in the Marine Corps you start at 100 yards, 200 yards, and you go back to 400 or 500 yards. So you know what distance you're at. So the target's always at the distance, and you're putting the dope on your book, and you're setting your sights as you move back, the drop of the round. Where in the Army, you kind of set your battle sight 0 and use a little bit of Kentucky windage, depending on, you just don't have a whole lot of time to be adjusting your sights. So you aim high, aim low, depending on how far away the target is. Aim at 6 o'clock or 12 o'clock. So that was kind of interesting. I probably learned more fieldcraft and Army basic training than I did in Marine Corps boot camp. Of course, they teach you how to put your tents up, and Marine Corps boot camp is, I think, more of challenging you in certain ways that forced you to succeed. They would put these challenges in front of you, like obstacle courses, and situations where you wouldn't normally do something like that. Like we had this one, it was a giant poles, 2 poles and they had rungs between them, and it was probably 4 or 5 stories tall, and they're telephone poles, 2 telephone poles this way and then telephone poles this way, and they were fairly far apart, just far enough for you to kind of grab a hold, and you keep going up and up. They get a little closer together at the top. You got to go over the top, and then you got to work your way back down. I mean, that was one of them. But those, those things where you challenge yourself physically and mentally to be able to succeed. I don't remember doing a lot of that in Army basic training. It was more about teaching you how to be an infantryman, tactics, fire team, squads, move into contact, some of that stuff. And then once you get done with basic training, then you go to advanced infantry training at the same location. So we went to infantry school at Fort Benning. That's really where you pick up how to be an infantry soldier, how to move as a member of a fire team, how to, move direct, like move into contact, ambushes, things like that. You learn how to set those up. So a little bit different, but some similarities.
Cool. So while deployed, was there any specific items or good luck charms that you would carry with you?
So I carried the St. Michael's necklace, the patron saint of soldiers and police, I think, law enforcement, So of course, most people had their Bible, but you had I at least had, my medallion. Um, I don't think I see anybody carrying like your rabbit's foots or anything like
Right.
that. But you know, people would have pictures of their family or kids or wife or girlfriend, those kind of things that they would carry with them. But I had a St. Christopher's medal that was, or St. Michael's medal that was pretty much the one thing that I carried.
Cool. So when you returned from service, what were your steps after that?
Well, let's see. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't have a whole lot of marketable skill sets. I could run, I could shoot, I could follow orders, I could give orders. So for about the first 6 months or a year or so, I kind of was trying to find that right job, or at least back then you were looking for a career, you know. So I kind of did a couple of jobs. I worked in the timber industry, cutting trees in Oklahoma. I did a short stint as a security officer at a refinery. I worked at Purdue Farms turkey plant, processing turkeys. And then I went to work for the Department of Correction. And that was probably around late 1990, I think. But it's difficult they tell you when to get up, when to go to work,
Right.
when to go home, when to go to bed, and so you're very regimented. And when you're not in that environment, it's a little bit different, you know. But they give you the skills, leadership skills, and you know, self-discipline to be able to do that kind of for yourself. But you know, you don't really see that in a lot of other people. So it was a little bit of a struggle going from military life to civilian life.
And what you would say would be the best thing that you got from your time deployed?
Deployed? I mean, I got combat infantry badge, combat action badge. I got Bronze Star, Army Commendation. I mean, those are kind of got a lot of ribbons and medals and stuff like that for being deployed in a combat zone. You know, that you hear people talk about band of brothers and stuff like that, but being in a potentially deadly, stressful situation with other young men about your same age really builds bonds that will last for a lifetime. You'll get the same thing out of boot camp and basic training, and just being in those. It's kind of like, you know, if you're on an athletic team or something like that, but that's a lot more intensified in combat or in the military in general.
Cool. And is there anything else that we haven't talked about so far that you would like to add, something that sticks out to you?
Well, let's see. I did some interesting things while I was in the military, while I was deployed. You know, I was one of the first main bodies to actually go into Iraq, which was pretty interesting. So we got the order to move to the line of departure, which is actually the border between Kuwait and Iraq. And so we were moving our company. We were a company-sized unit. And on the way there, we passed the 82nd Airborne. They had a huge convoy, hundreds and hundreds of vehicles. We only had like 6 or 8 vehicles, you know, big trucks that we were riding in. And so we beat them to the line of departure point, like by about 1/10 of a mile, you know. So we're literally hauling butt as we're passing them, you know, to get ahead of them, because we didn't want to be behind at those hundreds of vehicles that were going through the LD point. So we got ahead of those, and that was kind of funny. They were not particularly happy with us, but so we moved up, and moved through the LD. That was pretty good. It was a little bit surreal because we followed Third ID. So Third ID was the advanced, and then we were behind them. And not a lot of contact initially with the enemy, but as we would go down the road, you would see vehicles that were blown up and bodies and that kind of stuff, moving through. And then we stopped at Nasiriyah and set up security because they were running an airfield there, so the A-10s and aircraft would be refueling and re-equipping from that location as they continue moving forward. So we secured that area. So my job was to secure the southern airfield from anti-aircraft missiles and surface air missiles. So we would run patrols over this huge swath of desert, trying to keep basically the flight path coming in, because the aircraft got to come in and they're slowing down to come in and land. So I was literally straight off the end of the runway, so every plane coming in had to fly right over the top of us. And then we had just this huge swath flat land out there, and so we would go out there and run patrols day and night. And so one night I was out, we were on a patrol, and we were on the far right flank of the U.S. Army, and to our right flank was the United States Marine Corps. And we were out on patrol one night, and we didn't have comms with the Marine Corps, and so we're out in this desert moving. I think it was probably 8-man squad, and attack helicopter came in on us, and we couldn't communicate with them, and so it's nose down on us, and it's kind of hovering around us nose down, and I was like, I just told my guys, I was like, just wave at them, don't point your weapon, just wave at them. And so I figured they probably saw us from the distance with FLIR and thermals, and this random group of 8 people across the desert, in a combat zone, and they didn't have any comms, so that was a little bit scary. I was out on a patrol one night, and it was pitch dark, and we ran into a bull camel, just randomly, and you don't realize how big they are until like you're standing next to them. Some of them are ginormous. We just ran into this thing in the middle of the night. I think we scared it, and it scared us. And it was grunting, and it's not, the desert's not necessarily smooth, It's kind of a misnomer because it's not like a beach, right? It's especially in southern Iraq, Saddam had literally drained the swamps. He drained all the swamps, so it's kind of it's dirt. It's like hard pan, and then when it rains, it's because it's kind of clay and it gets real slick, right? But it's got ravines and rocks, and it's not all sand dunes like you see in the movies. There are places like that, but most of it is just hard dirt that nothing grows on. Ironically, though, they did have wheat fields in certain locations. Irrigation, that was something I was pretty impressed with, because we were right off the Euphrates, and the amount of complexity in the irrigation system to be able to divert water from the main river into miles of this desert where they could but there was canals everywhere that also hindered a lot of movement. I've seen a lot of guys get hurt, their vehicle flip over, and they because we drive on the canal on the top of it like a levee. So you're driving on this levee, and there's no grass, and it's dirt, and if it's muddy, it gets slick, and the Humvees are, they're not great on traction on slick mud, you know, and it's a super heavy vehicle. But that's some of the stuff we did on the early part. And then when we got moved up to Kalamazoo, where we were doing, you know, route clearance and search missions, we were kind of on our own out there. We go on regular missions. We were responsible for clearing the main supply route of any ambushes, IEDs, which are improvised devices, you know. And when I was there, we did that on foot. We didn't have like up armored vehicles or anything, so we developed techniques to clear the routes, and then probably found more IEDs than any other unit in our area. So it was pretty exciting. It's hailing.
Yeah, participating right now.
It's crazy. So IED route clearance was a little bit scary.
Right.
You know, because your mom was telling your mom, you know, when I found my first IED, and because I was an engineer and an infantryman, I thought I knew something about disarming mines and explosive devices. So, you know, there's these wires coming out of the ground, so I'm looking at it, and have my guys get back, and I start clearing it, and I'm probing it, and start clearing and probing, and it's in a burlap bag. So I take this burlap bag and kind of start tearing it apart, and there's 235 millimeter howitzer rounds, U.S. ammunition, that they take the fuse out of the front, and they put because it's kind of a cone shape, and they put a blasting cap in there. So it's full of high explosives, and they put a blasting cap in there, and they run a wire out, and they either command detonate it, which means they activate it and detonate it, or you have a sensor or tripwire or plate. So that was my first one, and I found a lot more after that. The last one I found before I left, we were on route clearance, and I was actually sitting on the top of a Humvee, and we were rolling about 2 miles an hour. It was early in the morning. It was probably 7 o'clock. And as we're moving down the highway, I'm using my binoculars. I'm kind of scanning in front of us, and just because of the morning dew had kind of set, there was something on the side of the road that didn't look right, and so we stopped. I dismounted it, and I started going up to it. And as I get up there, because I could see like these little dark circles on the side of the road. So as I get up there, there's a dark circle, and there's this pink cord that's coming out, and it's going 20 yards, and it's going in. So I go up there, it's coming out, and it's going up, going. Well, what it was a daisy chained IED, and I was right in the middle of it because of the kill zone on it. And so, you know, I hollered at my guys, had them set up a perimeter and sweep left and right to make sure there was not somebody out there with, you know, a cell phone or command detonate or something like that. And we found the end of it. It was already wired up, ready to go. So either we had to run them off, or they didn't have enough targets in the middle of the kill zone to be able to activate the IED. And that was probably one of the scariest after the fact,
Right.
you know, that I had encountered while I was there. And then we caught so they had face cards. So, you know, like a deck of cards got a Jack, Queen, King face. So for all these high value targets in the Iraqi army or the Ba'athist party, they were on the cards. So we played cards with these. And so we were doing a kind of a area patrol, and we were stopping at different random houses and searching the area and the property. So we were searching this house, It was a big 2-story house. We were searching. There was a lot of men there, military age people, and we were just getting ready to leave, and they drive a lot of Toyota pickup trucks in the Middle East, and so I was like, well, somebody hadn't searched the truck yet, so I lifted the seat forward, and there was a machine gun back there. So we got everybody in and put everybody on the ground, and then we searched the truck some more, and we lifted they had a little bed liner in it.
Mm-hmm.
We lifted this bed liner out, and there was RPGs and ammunition in it. So we knew we had something there. And then we started searching some more, and we found a bunch of documents in a briefcase. And this guy was a 2-star general in the Iraqi army, and he was one of the face guards. I can't remember what the guy's name was, probably now, but we turned him over, and I'm sure he probably went to Guantanamo or something like that. So that was pretty cool. We got a medal for that as well. And in fact, after we cleared that house, they had the Air Force come in and they blew it up. And so they had a little bird helicopter, because it's in a little neighborhood. And so they had the helicopters come in and the loudspeakers, this is what happens if you join with the insurgents. And then they dropped 2 500-pound bombs on it and just decimated it, so that was kind of cool. I was there, what was it? Like I said, I was there when they rescued Jessica Lynch. That was pretty close to where we were at. And then, of course, in being in Mosul and kind of being part of the first elections that they had, that was pretty interesting. It was kind of a weird situation, but because it's a big city, so it's mostly urban combat, and one of the largest mosques in Iraq is up there as well, and that's where Uday and Qusay were up. They were in that Saddam's 2 sons. They were in the same area, and that was one of the missions that the task force was assigned to, was finding those 2 knuckleheads. But we were able to go to the city of Nineveh, which you may have heard of in the Bible, Nineveh. So Nineveh is where Mosul is at, and it's an ancient city, and it's got the walls of Nineveh on the old city was really kind of pretty interesting to be able to see that. One of the oldest Christian churches was next to where our combat outpost was at. So it was a ruin, but being able to see that was just the history in the region of Mesopotamia. You're running up and down the Tigris and Euphrates and Garden of Eden and all that stuff in that general vicinity. But there's a lot of cool things we did while we're deployed.
Cool. All right. Thank you. That was great. We're at 43 minutes right now.
43 minutes.
You did great. Thank you.
Great. Yep. We did it.